Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to look at potting compost and potentially you making your own potting compost. If you're anything like me at this particular point in the lockdown process, we've sown seeds, we've had seed trays going out, potting up. I'm really through my bag of compost. And yes, I could go down to the local supermarket and wait in line with my 2 metre distance for a couple of hours just to purchase a bag of compost. But actually I've got all the raw constituents that I need to make my own compost. And it's really easy and simple for you to do if you've just got some simple components. Let's answer 2 questions to begin with though, before we look at the compost making process. First of all, when you purchase your bag of compost, how do you know how old it is? The simple answer to that is you don't. They're not date stamped on the bag, so you do not know how old that compost is. You trust in the fact that it's fresh, but it may well have been sitting there 6 months. Depending on how it's been stored, if it's in full sunlight, it'll degrade. If it's in darkness or if it's wet, it'll degrade. So when once you get it home and your plants start to fail, effectively, you normally blame yourself, but it might well be the bag of compost. Second question is to ask, why do we measure compost in litres? We normally associate litres with liquid, but actually it's a measurement of volume. And because compost changes density depending on the amount of water that's actually in there, it's better to supply it in a volume measurement rather than a weight measurement. And it's quite simple. That's the reason why they're supplied in litres. More water in there, the heavier it gets. Less water in there, the lighter your compost actually gets. So moving on to simple ingredients then. First of all, what I've got here is I've got some compost, which I've composted for around about 12 months. So depending on what you put in your compost, obviously that will change the mix that you actually produce and use. So that's the first part of the mix. If you've got some sand, concrete in sand with gravel in is just as good as ordinary sand. This is a bit buff, but this is quite damp already. So this is a bag of sand because I landscape. I just happen to have lying around the place. The alternative to that, folks, if you have got some, or in better times, is things like vermiculite. So vermiculite aerates the soil and holds on to a little bit of water. So if you have got some of that, that would be the perfect alternative to sand. But hey, I've just got some sand. So there you go. There's your essential mix ingredients for your compost you're going to make. Now it's quite simple. The mix is 2 parts by volume compost, as in compost we've made in our composters, and 1 part sand or vermiculite or perlite. So we're going to put 2 parts of the compost we've made in our garden to 1 part actual sand. Now by volume means whatever you actually happen to be using that time. So if you've got a pot, it'll be 2 pots of this and 1 pot of this. But because I use a lot of compost, I'm using buckets. So you can see down below I've got quite a few buckets, and I've got my 2 parts compost. Really lovely stuff, look. Really gorgeous. And I've put this through a sieve, folks. So I've sieved it through, taken out any big lumps. I've got my bucket of sand, and then my additional fertiliser is fish, blood and bone. Now there's 12 litres in each bucket. So I've got 36 litres. And fish blood and bone, you need to add around about 10 grams of fish blood and bone per litre. So I've got around about 400 grams, thereabouts, of fish blood and bone. Now here's how to make your potting compost. We pop 1 bucket into a wheelbarrow. And again, you don't need to do a big mix like this. Pop in a little bit of sand. And sand is quite heavy for the mix, especially if it's wet like that. And then we just give that a little bit of a mix through. And then we'll add the other bucket of compost. finish off with a little bit of sand on top. And then we just give that a really good mixing together. And if you've ever made concrete, it's exactly the same as making concrete. Use your shovel, get really well in there. And at the end of the day, all of the ingredients should be mixed well together by the time you're finished. And most of all, it should be light and fluffy. So as we're mixing through, we can add a little bit of our fish blood and bone, sprinkle it in, and again mix through. And then a little bit more. And then just give it one really good final mix. And then just level it out in the wheelbarrow. Take a watering can. We add a little bit of water. Sorry, Bear. We give that a little bit of a mix through. You got a flick of the watering can there. Bear loves fish blood and bone. Don't you, Bear? And then once we're happy that the water content is fine, we take our compost pot, pop it in there, and then effectively pop a label in, the date today, and there is fresh potting compost that you've made yourself. You know exactly what date that was made, and effectively you've made your own potting compost. For seed compost, just halve the amount of fertiliser. You can use garden soil, but at the end of the day, garden soil does contain pests, diseases, weed seeds, so you may have to pop that into the microwave 30 seconds on high power, but do make sure there's no worms and metal in there, or cook on gas mark 2 for around about 90 minutes. But I do warn you that soil from the garden smells to high heaven, so you'll either like it or love it. So there you go. Make your own potting compost out of raw ingredients that you've got in your garden and save yourself a little bit of money and time. Hope to see you for the next video, folks. Thanks again for the subscriptions. The channel is coming along really, really well. You're obviously enjoying what I'm putting out there. Lots more to come. Keep gardening, guys.